But
I can't fucking hear you.
but
Is the louder family here?
Okay, we're done mic checking. That's all. we've made all the successful mic check sounds.
hello, welcome to Contesting Wrestling.
Hey, that's Evan's line.
I stole it.
This is already. You see, I already feel overwhelmed now because it's 3 against 1 now. That's the thing.
Everyone kick his shins.
So you are listening to Contesting Wrestling, the podcast where now 3 of my dear friends, who are all deeply invested in and experts upon the art of professional wrestling, try to convince me, somebody who is a lifelong not fan, one might say anti-fan.
Active resentment.
There we go. Wrestling skeptic is the nice word for it that I use when I've just watched matches that I enjoy, and then if I've just sat through 2 hours of hot garbage for this podcast, I would describe myself as an anti-wrestling crusader.
At least one of the Rumbles we made you watch also is hot garbage.
Yeah.
Anti-wrestlite?
Maybe.
That sounds a little bit too much like anti-Semite.
That was the idea.
Yes.
That's the joke.
My name is Evan Burke. This has been a real journey for me. The most important thing that you're going to notice today is we are joined by our now semi-regular to fully regular, depending on how everybody's schedule plays out, contributor, the fantastic, immortal indie ref extraordinaire, Betsy Ross.
I do what I feel like.
That's the core of reffing.
That's what
You
we
do
want
what you
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody holds rules over you.
At good old BR. Available for bookings.
Available.
The rest of us are, this might be the first episode that people are listening to, so
Yeah.
we should
People like
probably
Royal Rumbles, and we're going to talk about Royal Rumbles.
introduce ourselves individually.
I love Royal Rumbles. What are you talking about? Royal Rumbles are like wrestling drugs to me.
There you go.
Rumble, rumble!
But I refer to the Royal Rumble every year as Wrestling Christmas.
Anyway, to continue the introductions, then, my name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been involved in pro wrestling for well over 10 years. I do wrestling commentary, ring announcing. I talk a lot, so I do a little bit of everything, and I am here to lend my expertise from the inside.
I'm Dr. Ben Abelson. I'm a professor of philosophy at Mercy College and a lifelong fan of what happens in the squared circle,
The what
which
now?
is wrestling.
Oh.
He's also single.
Thank you, Miss Ross. Unlike in philosophy where we point out that squared circles are actually impossible, nothing is impossible in the world of professional wrestling.
And man, we are entering into a subcategory of wrestling, I suppose, a recurring event.
Yearly event. Every year since 89 or 88.
88.
Okay.
That certainly seems to stretch the possibilities of what's possible. You know what? I actually don't really have a clever thing about it. I had mixed feelings about the Royal
It's a
Rumbles.
fucking clusterfuck.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the cluster. No, wait, there was an actual
No,
match
there's
called the clusterfuck, but like.
Right, the clusterfuck is every year at the Joey Janela spring break, I believe. But all of those matches, well, I would say all of those matches have their roots in the Royal Rumble. Really, all of these matches have their roots in the traditional Battle Royal. And the Battle Royal, which has become kind of a throwaway thing at a lot of shows. Just to give a little history before we get right into the specifics, the Battle Royal used to be a really big deal. You would have like all of your guys in the ring at once, and they wouldn't do the entrances every couple of minutes like they do at the Royal Rumble. It would just start with 20 or 30 guys or whatever, and then they'd throw each other out of the ring. It was
Punch
a big
each other.
yeah. It was a big spectacle.
In Japan, they do it with also pinfalls and submissions.
Right, which adds a whole other dimension to it. And for a long time, it was Andre the Giant's signature match, because Andre the Giant would go from territory to territory. And if you have a guy who's only going to be around for a couple of weeks, even if they're the biggest star, you don't want them to be the world champion or anything, because nobody's going to beat them and then they're gone. But
Also, nobody was ever going to beat Andre the Giant
Right.
for the title.
So what you can do, though, is put Andre in a battle royal, so the people in the arena, first of all, you see how big he is, which is a big part of the draw, because he's standing next to all these regular-sized wrestlers. Or I should say, these already large wrestlers. He's much larger than them. And then he gets to beat everyone and throw them over the top, and he wins. And it's the Andre the Giant show. And then he can go do it in the next territory. Nobody looks bad because he beat them.
He can
And,
even throw the champion out of the ring,
Right.
in some sense beating the champion without actually pinning them or submitting them.
Right, exactly. And it would be like, well, you know, he is Andre the Giant. How can you possibly compete with a man so large?
Kick him in the knees.
So the Royal Rumble
Yeah.
is an evolution on that concept where instead of everyone starting in at once, wrestlers come out in regular intervals, usually 2 minutes or 90 seconds, or for that 2018 Women's Rumble, seemingly whenever the fuck they wanted to throw a new person out there.
Titan time, brother.
There were
Titan time, yeah.
There were definitely like 20-second intervals towards the end.
Yeah, we were trying to figure that out actually watching it. We're like, is it the same timing here? Is it- what's-
Supposedly.
yeah.
I think the 92 Rumble was 2 minutes, or at least
Yes.
officially 2 minutes. The 2016 Rumble that we also watched was 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember what they announced for the 2018 Women's Rumble.
I don't think they announced it.
Whenever
But,
the heck
yeah.
they want.
Yeah, I did commentary over the first Chikara Infinite Gauntlet, and you know it was advertised as 88 seconds between entrants, and it was 88 seconds. That was timed exactly.
That attention to detail, I think, is kind of a hallmark for Chikara too.
Yeah, you know, especially like at the time, it's very it's a little rigid, but if you know, there's a reason for it. If you ignore the rules you've set enough, then the fans don't believe you.
I think also in Chikara, there's an expectation that some super hardcore nerdy fans are timing it.
Yes.
I'm sure they were.
Whereas, you know, some people might be timing the WWE Rumbles, but not an important enough part of the fan base for it to really matter to Vinnie Mac.
Right. Vince McMahon can't hear the hardcore fans over all the piles of money he's making.
So in any Battle Royal or in the Royal Rumble, eliminations occur when someone is thrown over the top rope and their feet touch the floor. Both feet touch the floor is very important.
Right.
And then once everyone has entered and everyone has been eliminated, whether it's 20 or 30 or 1 year 40 people, the last person standing is the winner. Notable about the Women's Royal Rumble is that in the past, women's battle royals, before the so-called women's revolution of the last couple of years, women were thrown over the second rope to be eliminated.
Yeah,
over-
they were
over the
really
middle
just
rope.
tossed out in general meant you were out. It's like they didn't trust women to take the kind of bumps required to, you know, like do a full top rope exit. And like the woman at the time, the training standards were so low that some of them probably had no idea how to.
Sure.
You'll note when I mean we'll go through these one by one, but even like in the Women's Rumble when like Tori Wilson came out, it was good to see Tori Wilson, but like she couldn't get her feet off the ground at all, even just to get over the
Oh
top
my God,
rope.
she forgot everything.
Yeah, and she wasn't very good to begin with.
She was super over, though,
Oh yeah, oh she got over every time she came to the ring.
and she looked great.
Of course.
Oh, most of those girls were. I mean, what Rumble are we going to start with? We should go in order. I
Okay.
feel like.
Well, we
Let's go in
watched
order.
for this podcast, and we're gonna we've been talking a lot. We're gonna get Evan's take in a second. I wanted to get some history and some facts down first. We watched the 1992 Royal Rumble, we watched the 2016 Royal Rumble, and we watched the 2018 Women's Royal Rumble, which was the first Women's Royal Rumble.
One last piece of information. Traditionally, since 1993, the winner of the Royal Rumble, whether men's or women's, has gone on to face one of the world champions at WrestleMania. With the exception of the 2016 Rumble, which was for the title, the champion, who was Roman Reigns at the time, was actually in the match. The 92 Rumble was before this tradition had started, and it was also for the vacant WWF then World Championship.
Yes, wiry veteran vacant. He always wins the title when you least expect it.
I mean, I get the idea, right? It sounds like a great idea. As I was watching it, I could feel how much more I would enjoy it if I was a wrestling fan. I know that sounds like something that would be true of all matches, but this really does seem to be specifically engineered to make you be like, oh, like, who's coming next? What's going to happen? What storylines are going to be at play in this? Like, and it could be anything. They could bring somebody out from the fucking 70s, and they're
And
going to,
they do.
like, yeah, like, there could be also, in that sense, I could really tell. This was also where I really started to feel you've said before, like, I should really just come over to your house and watch this stuff because sitting by yourself in your house with a notepad watching wrestling is not great. And this was also very much I can see how if I was watching this with a bunch of people, every time somebody comes out, it'd be another, oh shit, it's this guy.
I will say you are definitely invited to my place for the Royal Rumble, like, that's happening.
No,
shortly.
I know. Okay, yes, I will come to that. Yeah,
the current one.
We're recording this on
Yes,
January
yes.
6th, and I don't know what happened in the last 3
We're
weeks.
speaking to you
it
from
was
the
the
past.
holidays, and it just was a total clusterfuck, and then it was my
I
birthday.
can't remember the date exactly, but it's
Yeah.
right at the end of January. We'll talk.
Yeah.
This year's Royal Rumble should be particularly exciting because I think it's the first one in years where the WrestleMania main events aren't already set in stone.
Yeah.
So we have no idea who's going to win the Rumbles at this point.
The core problem, I think, is that it is very easy for this to turn into too many people in the ring, too much shit going on, dragging on for too long. There are a lot of ways for it to go wrong, and there are a lot of ways for it to just become especially as somebody who doesn't really know about wrestling, just the who the fuck is this guy factor was so high. Much better in the women's matches, I will say. The women's Royal Rumble was entertaining enough where the fact that I was like, what? Who is this? What's her deal? Like, didn't
is this
drag it
lady
down as
screaming?
much. Yeah.
It was definitely minute for minute the most entertaining of the 3 Rumbles that we watched. That's for sure.
Oh, that Rumble was incredible because like it was based entirely off of like finally getting the women their Royal Rumble, which they had deserved for much longer than it should have took. And there was a lot of nostalgia in that one because it was a lot of women who like were already like retired or semi-retired coming in and getting their spot in the Rumble and like paying tribute to a lot of girls who deserve better.
I think in general, a Rumble can be really well orchestrated where it's kind of amazing that they were able to get the mechanics down that well, or it can be a total mess, or it can just be boring and uneventful.
Well, my real question was, the whole time watching this, I'm wondering how booked is this? Because it does seem like from if you are a writer or if you're like a booker of who's putting the whole show together, this is like your ultimate fantasy, right? Like you can do so much with it. The order of people is really interesting. I'd imagine that you could get in there, and if you were to like meticulously plan out like the whole fucking hour-long thing, that could be really wild. I'm sure that is not what happens. But I don't. I don't know how booked it is.
So the more modern Rumbles are booked more or less like that. Now the older Rumbles are a lot less booked. Everyone knows when they're coming in, and they just kind of act like they're in a battle royal. There's a spot here and there,
and generally who you're eliminated after.
Yeah, yeah, and you know who you're supposed to eliminate. But the newer Rumbles, like the Women's Rumble, was definitely like probably not everybody beat for beat. But it was pretty beat for beat. Like, they had to know who was going to be in the ring when X, Y, and Z comes in.
Probably 2016 as well.
Yeah, 2016 as well, very much, with the whole story of Roman. And
92, part of what's kind of more fun about it for me is you can see, if you have an eye for it, how much they are improvising.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, again, it was planned out who's going to get eliminated when, who's going to come in when. But in terms of the actual beat-for-beat moves, it was definitely a lot more called in the ring.
I would my general impression of the 3 was that I thought 2018 had the best kind of rise and fall. Like, I thought it was sort of the best. It was the best narrative over the course of a match. It was all for me. The climax was Nia Jax hurling everybody else off of her in with a telekinetic force blast almost.
That was an Andre spot.
He
Totally.
doesn't get the context either, which is a shame, of Nia Jax being alone in the ring like, ha, nobody can beat me, and then Beth Phoenix comes out.
Right, Beth Phoenix was a great champion in an era where a lot of the women were just these models that we tend to complain about. But she was, jacked and powerful and good, and like Nia's standing there and nobody can touch her, and then Beth Phoenix comes out.
And you're like,
Oh.
Beth Phoenix Phoenix can take Nia.
Beth can take Nia. Phoenix is currently a commentator for the WWE. Like, she's retired, she has a couple of kids, and now she's doing commentary, and she's gotten a lot better. Like, I like her. Now, the first time she started doing it, it was rough, but, like, she's gotten so much better.
When she was an active competitor, she actually appeared in the men's Royal Rumble when there was only a men's Royal Rumble and eliminated the 7'4" Great Khali in that match. So, and again, I mentioned that Nia throwing everyone off is kind of an Andre spot. He was famous for, everyone piling on him and him throwing them all off. And Beth Nia was sort of reminiscent of Hogan Andre.
I felt like 2018 was the most well-constructed narrative of the three. I thought that 2016 seemed to be like a dumb version. Like, it was also a narrative and like had a flow to it, and to me I just thought it was like stupid.
Most of us did too.
Yeah.
That's the bad match if you didn't guess.
That I did. It is always fun when I don't know and like I'm like just spending the whole opening like, all right, like which one is this going to be?
I enjoyed watching it. It has its spots, but yeah, the
are
overarching
moments, yeah.
narrative is pretty dumb.
I didn't hate it as much as I did watching it live
Yeah.
originally, but it's still really bad.
And then 92 was kind of the most fun, I thought, partially just because of the era.
It's a completely different style.
The
Yeah.
characters are amazing.
The,
Yeah.
the guys are improvising, and everyone knows how to improvise.
Yeah.
And it's so like, well, okay, you said maybe we should do them in order. Can we get into them in specifically?
let's
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
dig
So
into
we should start with
92
92.
Let's
yeah.
start with 92. So 92 was one of the most star-studded Rumbles in history because it was for the WWF Championship before everybody was just winning the title. So it had Hogan and Ric Flair and Randy Savage and Roddy Piper.
Jake the Snake Roberts, Ted
Roberts.
DiBiase. It's before all the big 80s stars left.
Right.
And when a lot of the big 90s stars were already there,
Yeah.
at least the early 90s stars, people like Shawn Michaels, who had just turned heel.
Yeah, the week previous, he turned heel on Marty Jannetty.
We see the famous barbershop window
Yeah.
incident where he throws Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window.
Here's my question about the 92 Rumble. You said both competitors' feet have to hit the floor, right?
Yes.
Did Texas Tornado ever really get eliminated?
Oh. This was very shortly before his death, his suicide. I think.
He had 1 foot though already, right?
Yes, he
that was
already-
a fake foot.
He was alive for another year, I think.
I think I
About-
looked it up. He died sometime in 93.
Yeah,
he had
another
had
year,
1
year and a
foot
half.
for about 5 years by then,
Yeah.
I think, actually.
So yeah, Evan, one of the guys in Royal Rumble 92, the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. I don't know if you picked him out of the crowd.
I don't think I
Yeah.
do have notes about people who I didn't know the names of, but I
He
don't
was in
know.
like white trunks with some tassels.
He wasn't one of the bigger names in the
No,
match. He was definitely space filler.
He would have been a much bigger name 5 years previously. Well, a really notable thing that fans didn't know at the time is that he had one of his feet amputated. And there was filler in one of his boots.
Oh,
And
wow.
people couldn't really tell. But yeah, the Von Erich story is a long and tragic tale. Maybe we'll cover it one day. Maybe we won't,
February 18th, 1993 is when he passed. So a
R.I.P.
year and a
Kerry
month.
Von Erich.
So.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize once more about the barbershop window thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a really big deal. I remember it being a huge deal on the playground when I was a kid, before I was even that into wrestling. I knew who the Rockers were. That was the Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty tag team. And Shawn Michaels turning on Jannetty and becoming a heel and a singles competitor was absolutely shocking. And this is the very beginning of the sexy boy Shawn Michaels character.
Did you watch all the promos before the Rumble?
Yes, I watched
Yeah,
a bunch
okay.
of promos.
There's a lot of them.
I have notes like, why is Hulk talking like a normal person? Because he gives a promo that's kind of like, "Hey everybody, it's Hulk Hogan.
It's me, Terry
I'm
Bollea.
I'm excited to participate in the Royal Rumble." It's not quite like that, but
Yeah.
there was like one where he's turned it way down.
He's not the champion. He's been humbled.
Oh, interesting. Because then when he finally enters the Royal Rumble later, he's in full Hulk mode and acting like, I think his father must have died while doing laundry, and that's why Hulk hates shirts so much. But
So a little bit of context going into the Rumble, Hogan-wise. So Hogan had won the previous 2 Rumbles, 90 and 91. He had been the champion until he had won the title at WrestleMania from Sergeant Slaughter. And then late in the year, Ric Flair shows up in WWF. And the story behind this is really important for the Rumble. Ric Flair was the world champion of WCW. And then he had a contract dispute. He left the company still holding the title. And he called up Vince McMahon. He said, "Hey, you want to use me?" And Vince said, "Sure." And he's like, "By the way, I still have the title." And he's like, "Bring it to TV." So they would show the WCW, or it was still the NWA title.
It was the WCW championship, and specifically he had a non-compete clause. He couldn't show up on TV for 90 days, but he could send them the belt. And Bobby Heenan one day, just at the end of an episode of Superstars, was like, "Hey Gorilla, check this out," and then pulls out the world title of the competing company. Like,
I think they got a cease and desist for that because they started blurring it
Oh
out.
yeah.
yeah.
But eventually Flair gets to TV and starts calling himself the real world champion. And so he's calling himself the real world champion, but Hogan is the WWF champion. Flair first allies himself with The Undertaker and helps The Undertaker defeat Hogan for the title. But then they have a rematch, and there's so much chicanery. Even though Hogan wins the title back, Jack Tunney ends up stripping him of it, and that's why the title is vacant and is held up in the Rumble itself. So really, this was an opportunity for them to showcase Flair, to make Flair the champion, because he eventually wins the Rumble, but also he goes in at number 3 and lasts the entire length of the Rumble, longer than anyone had yet. And one of the things Flair was known for in his career were these hour-long matches. And they weren't going to do an Iron Man match in that day and age, but this was the way of showcasing Flair's endurance.
I mean, he really does. At the end of the Royal Rumble, he looks as tired as I do after 10 minutes of medium exercise.
Yes.
It's by like he looks like by at the very end he looks like he's like, oh, all right, I'm almost out of energy.
He said in interviews that doctors have been baffled at how low his heart rate is when it's resting. It's something like 30 beats a minute or something.
The crazy thing about it is he already looks 60.
Yeah, it feels like he has looked like an old man who has aged well since he was very young. What is exactly the nature of his character? I know he is the Nature Boy. Is that it? Is that all it is?
His gimmick is he's a sexual predator.
I think so.
Delete that.
It's not untrue, really.
Really untrue. Well, his gimmick is copied from a guy named Buddy Rogers, who was a huge star in the 60s.
And kind of copied from Gorgeous George a bit, too. It's sort of a hybrid of Gorgeous George and the more athletic sports style guy like Lou Thesz or Vern Gagne.
His gimmick came out a lot more if you watched him in the 80s in the NWA. He would come out wearing like fancy suits and brag about how much money he makes, and him and his crew are the best, and they all have fancy suits and Rolex watches.
And all the girls.
And they be tripping and bitches.
There is a reference to him rocking the cradle.
Yeah, I'm not even sure exactly what
Okay,
that's
yeah,
about.
like one of the announcers says that, and I'm like, that's never...
As
any
much
of the
as-
things that could mean are unacceptable.
As much as Ric Flair has been known for his sexual conquests, people specifically don't know him for like being a pedophile or anything.
That's
no
good. In
hair, no
fact-
flair.
Right, that's the word going around.
That's what Missy Hyatt said. No hair, no flair.
Right, he will not do anything with the groupie if they don't have any hair, because it's indicative of you either being too immature or too young.
In fact, in some of his promos in the NWA, he would insult Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express, saying that the girls they were after had training underwear. They were teeny boppers with training underwear, as opposed to the mature women that he was going after himself.
Because the Rock and Roll Express were very popular with teenage girls, like boy bands.
That is a real aspect of the inherent misogyny of society, that that women have to wear special training underwear to learn how to wear regular underwear before they're 15.
All right, ladies, what object are we being compared to today?
I'm going to quickly run through a list. I'm going to quickly run through some of the things I observed about people whose names I did not catch.
I'll see if I can guess them.
Okay.
It'll be a fun game.
Well, first off, my favorite character in this whole thing, who was unfortunately eliminated, there's some sort of a burglar character.
The Repo Man!
The Repo Man.
He
yes.
is one of the greatest characters
And
ever.
he just he's sneaking around. Like there were times when
It's
he
the
wasn't
Hamburglar.
writing. When I kept writing the Hamburglar down because that's all I could think of. And he was like looking for people to burgle, and even when he would do a move on somebody, it sort of seemed he would sneak up on him, and it was like, this is what I would do to you in your house while you slept, because I'm a burglar.
So it's not even that he's a burglar. He's the repo man. He's there to repossess your shit.
I mean, that maybe is what he says, but his costume and the way he acts is 100% a burglar.
Did you notice that his costume, it's gray with the black stripe, and the black stripe is like a tire track, like somebody ran him over while he was trying to repossess their car.
I didn't notice
I
that.
did not realize that.
They did heel vignettes with him where he was repossessing children's bicycles, and I don't know, he did one of the promos beforehand, and he said his immortal catchphrase, remember what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. I'm glad you dug the repo, man.
Yeah.
Barry Darso actually played several successful characters throughout his career, but the Repo Man is by far the best.
They absolutely should bring him back.
Actually, there was a guy who looked kind of like him in Ring of Honor like 10 years ago, Adam Pearce, and his singlet reminded people of Repo Man's gear, and people would chant Repo Man at him, and one day he pulled out the little mask and put it on, and the place went absolutely nuts.
I mean, Adam Pearce is under contract.
Yeah, he got a job, man.
They could make him Repo Man's son, Repo Jr. Yeah. The kids can call him Roju.
There's a guy who just looks like my dad's friend that we would go see the Allman Brothers with every year.
Oh, man.
He's got long hair and kind of a mustache thing. Maybe he was Jake the Snake
Oh,
Roberts.
yeah, that sounds like Jake the Snake
Sounds like
Roberts.
Jake
Yeah.
the Snake Roberts. Yeah,
He's
a
one of
tall
the greats
dude.
of all
He's
time.
incredible.
And he was beefing with the Macho Man?
I think so.
That's one of the important stories going into the Rumble. Is so when Macho Man and Elizabeth got married, Jake the Snake pulled out a cobra, like a real cobra, and it bit the shit out of fucking Macho Man, and they had all sorts of beef. Yeah.
And then Liv
Wow.
Morgan ran in.
Is the Macho Man? I mean, is he a macho man? Like, in what
He
way
came
is
up
he
with
the
the
Macho
name
Man?
in the 70s.
That's it.
so,
He's like a psychedelic 70s
Yeah.
guy.
Freak out.
Yeah. He's fucking
He's
the
the
Macho
Macho-
Man.
yeah.
It seems like characters from that time are not like, it's just sort of like, here's a fun name, and then here's what happens when I have a lot of adrenaline going on. Like, and that's
Basically.
You
It's
mean
not-
cocaine?
Yeah. Some of them cocaine, but some of them I wouldn't be surprised if they're just like that all the time.
Yep, they've asked people about Savage's cocaine use, and the word is he just drank a lot of coffee. And who knows? But
His promos are some of the most insane shit ever. I don't know if you got a taste of that with his promo here.
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. Who is in Paul Bearer's urn?
nobody knows.
Is it ever addressed?
This will be part of the subject of the Undertaker versus Undertaker match,
Okay.
actually.
Yeah, we'll watch that soon.
I want to say one other thing about Savage. So one of the inconsistencies in the rules of the Rumble, which this other podcast that Doc and I both guested on called Eliminated, that's their whole bread and butter, is pointing out these inconsistencies. But I thought I might as well mention it. Savage jumps out of the ring going after Jake the Snake Roberts, and they don't count him as being eliminated, saying he has to be thrown out by someone else. This rule is not entirely adhered to throughout the history of the Royal Rumble. I remember specifically Mil Mascaras, I think in '96, eliminating himself that way.
Mil Mascaras notoriously didn't want to put anybody over ever at all, and he wouldn't.
Thinks he's the greatest wrestler of all time.
Right, so he was like, "Well, I have to eliminate myself because I'm not going to let anyone else eliminate me." And they were doing the Royal Rumble in a huge stadium in South Texas and San Antonio, and they wanted to bring in a few authentic luchadors to draw in the house. And so they got Mil Mascaras, who's an interesting character that we don't have the time, but maybe we'll talk about Mil at some point. Man of 1,000 masks.
It will not come as a surprise to listeners of this podcast that somebody who I am not rooting for is the big boss man. 'Cause we all know my stance on bosses, which is no thank you.
Especially ones who are cops.
And then he's a cop too.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
a boss cop.
Yup.
I'm glad he didn't win.
You'll be serving hard time.
But
if you
Ray
go up against the
Ray
boss man.
Trailer was incredible.
Yeah.
For his size, he could move very, very well. He was younger than he looks. He was kind of a prodigy. He died fairly young.
In his 40s,
In
I
his
think.
40s. He was a very good competitor. And he knew how to play those characters well. Facer, if he was the
gonna
heel
look this
cop,
up.
he'd be the worst heel cop you've ever seen. Like, and when he was the face cop, he was like, it wasn't like he was the face cop trying to put people in jail. He was just like kind of virtuous.
Just trying to
at-
put their faces
Yo,
in
Yeah.
yo,
jail.
he was such an evil heel cop. He cooked a dog.
Right, he cooked a
That
dog
was-
once.
yeah.
In the 90s.
But by then he was more like private security for Vince McMahon.
Ah,
than
he
a
was
cop.
only 41 when he died.
That
You
run
actually-
was great. He
I mean,
was
you-
so evil.
You have to cook a dog to join Blackwater.
He's in some of the most ridiculous moments of the Attitude Era. Riding Big Show's father's casket. Oh, no.
Yes.
Towing away,
yes.
his father's casket while Big Show rides it, trying to release it.
This is a preview for the when we talk about the next match. But I did watch the Chex Mix Big Show focus group ad before. Anyway, that's all. We'll get into that.
All right.
Two more people. All right. There's a guy who has wood.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Hacksaw, yes.
So that
Oh,
he's a carpenter.
He just has a stick.
He just has a stick. That's
Yeah.
that's the extent of it.
He would also carry like a giant oversized American flag. He's from upstate New York. He was a very big star as well.
he's a working class American.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps some sort of logger up in Glens Falls, New York.
It's something with wood. He's
Yeah.
doing something with wood. He held it aloft and then brought it to the ring in a way that seemed very like ritualistic, almost
Absolutely.
like a torch bearer.
He's also part Santa Claus.
I could see that. I could tell that about.
He had a great little old man run in the mid 2000s. They signed him like in his 50s. Like, well, people still like Hacksaw, right? And they did. Absolutely. And he lost to everyone.
I would cheer for Hacksaw now.
Yeah.
He was also a brutal heel in Mid-South Wrestling before he came to the WWF,
In the early 80s, yeah.
feuding with Ted DiBiase, who was also in this Rumble, the $1 Million Man.
And then finally, deceased Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein seems to
that is-
accompany somebody to the ring at
That
one
is
point.
that is Adnan Al-Kaisi, a guy who made a lot of money off of looking exactly like Saddam Hussein. The guy he led to the ring, where they were calling Colonel Mustafa, is normally known as the Iron Sheik. He was a very famous
Okay,
wrestler
I've
over the
heard
years.
of- I've
And
heard
now
of
a
him.
famous Twitter celebrity.
Yeah, Howard Stern found out he was nuts and brought him on the show a bunch of times to be nuts. And he makes a living just being nuts at conventions and stuff these days.
I'm not entirely sure he runs his own Twitter, but it's hilarious regardless.
Yes, both of those things.
Yeah, so that was all, that whole package of General Adnan and Colonel Mustafa was all behind the Sergeant Slaughter heel turn, which was the subject of the match with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7, or the previous year, where the first Iraq War happened, Gulf Storm, and
Desert
Um,
Storm.
Desert Storm.
As of
yeah.
time of recording, there have been 2 Gulf Wars, so that may have changed by the time this
We'll
is released.
find out
So Desert Storm was really
if this is released.
the most marketed war of all time, I think. I remember having Desert Storm trading cards.
Yep.
And the WWF tried to cash in on it by turning beloved Patriot Sergeant Slaughter heel by having him join the Iraqi side to lead up to this match with Hogan. And then, of course, the war only lasted like 2 weeks. And so
So
kind of killed the feud.
this months-long angle they had planned all of a sudden was just really uncomfortable because it was like, we got in there, we did our mission, now we'd like to stop. It'd be nice if we stopped now and again these days like we did there. But yeah, so they had
I mean-
a really awkward main event at WrestleMania 7 for a war that had happened like months previously.
Whoops!
Yeah, they wanted to do it at the LA Coliseum in front of 100,000 people, and then they had to cut it to the the LA Coliseum might be the name of the arena that they went to. I may have that mistaken. But they went down to the arena and drew about 19,000 people instead of 100. They said there was a bomb scare, which is probably, I don't know about that.
Speaking of patriotism, also in this match is newly turned babyface Nikolai Volkov. He had been babyface for a couple of years now,
Yeah.
ever since the Cold War ended, because he had been the evil Soviet. And once the Soviet Union no longer existed, they had him come out and sing God Bless America with Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Right, they would tag team. It did not work for Nikolai. Nikolai was a grand and a vicious heel for 15 years. I remember reading a statement from him when Ronald Reagan died. He said, I voted for Ronald...
Fuck yeah! Oh,
No, he said, I voted for Ronald Reagan twice because Ronald Reagan...
I remember when I told my dad Ronald Reagan died. My dad just looked at me and was like, "Good, he was the Antichrist."
And anyway, yeah. So
Ronald Wilson
Volkov
Reagan,
said,
666. Sorry.
That's what my dad said.
Yep. I learned that on the Boondocks. Sorry, Doc.
"Oh, that's good.
Sorry.
This is all good
Sorry
stuff."
to anyone who may or may have not have been a fan of Ronald Reagan. It was all anecdotal.
They're not listening to this
No, they're
podcast
not.
anymore.
This is all good stuff.
They're
We've made it
boomers.
clear.
So he said he voted for Ronald Reagan twice because Ronald Reagan made people afraid of the Russians, and when people were afraid of the Russians, he made a lot of money.
I can see, yeah.
Yeah,
I can see that.
and he himself was like a refugee from the area. He was from one of the favored by the central government parts of the Eastern Bloc, and he was. I knew a few people like from there at the time. They were all big fans of Reagan just because of how much Reagan would mess with the area,
Sure.
because they had a common enemy in the Soviet government.
Yeah, I could see if you're
Right, right.
if you're living in one of the more ignored parts of the Soviet Union,
Right,
like, not a fan of it.
Not a fan of it. Anyway, so those I like your descriptions of all those wacky characters, because there were so many great characters, and you can't just describe Randy Savage in 2 words. It's like watch an hour's worth of his promos and you understand him and his manic energy and his craziness. But it's not like today where it's your gimmick is 2 words because it has to be logoed properly.
Well, because it also feels like today, your character is, you can hear the pitch. You can hear that somebody figured out their character to a really specific thing because they were like, I'm only going to get a brief period of time to talk to this person in the industry who can help me get ahead as a wrestler. So here's my focused character. Here's my, short little description that is digestible, which is not necessarily inherently a bad thing. It forces people to focus and really think of like, what is the nature of my character? But yeah, it doesn't lend itself as much to people who are themselves characters.
And you're never going to have that nowadays, because before the internet, where did these people come from?
Yeah.
They had these mysterious upbringings and histories that you did not have access to, and they just emerged on your TV as this inscrutable enigma of a human being. And that's not going to exist anymore. And Savage was that more than anybody else.
All right, you want to move on to 2016?
I want to just talk about...
no, but we have to.
we should talk a little bit about the Rumble itself.
Real quick. So one of the great things about the Rumble, as you already alluded to a bit, Evan, is that you get these pairings. You get these matchups that you can't predict in advance that are sometimes really significant because they build on prior history. I just want to run down a few of those that are significant in this match. So first of all, you get the British Bulldog and Shawn Michaels at number 1 and 2. Which they would be again in 1995 and go all the way to the end of the Rumble with Shawn winning it.
Quick side note, he is actually British?
Yes.
Because it does sound like he's doing an accent.
No, he's totally
Okay.
British. From Manchester.
He is very, very British indeed.
Then you have Flair and Michaels, who, Flair's retirement match would eventually be against Shawn Michaels. Many, many years later.
Decades later.
And Shawn, in many ways, was a sort of a new version of the Ric Flair character, kind of starting up in that day.
This has confirmed that we need to do a Ric Flair episode, because also just like I was impressed by the fact that he was doing, that sort of older style of wrestling that I historically have not cared for, but there really is something to the way that he does it, where it's interesting, and also just the fact that he's like still doing cool shit at the end of the match when most normal humans or even other professional wrestlers would be like a wreck at that point.
People would say at the end of these hour-long matches that he'd do, it's like his opponents would be like, and I'm like sucking wind, I'm ready to go home, and then I look over at Flair and his eyes snap open and he's like, all right, time to fire up, come on. And you just go. And I wanted to do this Rumble partially because of Ric Flair. He's famous for these hour-long matches. But instead of just starting off with like Flair versus Steamboat or one of his famous hour-long matches, he does an hour in this Rumble. So why not watch him interact with everybody?
Yeah. And also, it's really, it really means a lot if the person who wins the Rumble
Yeah.
is in the ring the whole time. And when he wins at the end, you actually
yes.
feel like, oh, maybe he deserves it.
Especially if it's for the
maybe
title.
There was a fucking sporting aspect to it. Maybe we didn't just hand it to some charisma-free fucking numbnuts after he gets to go take a time out.
Oh, yes. No, you got exactly what's wrong with the 2016 Rumble,
Hey,
Evan.
I want to point out about the 2016 Rumble, all of that making Roman Reigns look stupid, and then they didn't give it to him,
Oh,
making him look even stupider.
Oh, he didn't. Wait, he didn't win.
Remember? No,
No,
Triple
Triple
H.
H
Oh, right,
wins.
right. I was so angry about it that I blocked
Yeah.
it out.
All
Right,
right,
of
it's
course.
awful.
All right,
What-
we'll
what
we'll
are
get
they
back to
doing?
this
We'll
in
get to
just
that in a
minute.
few
Yeah.
minutes.
So just a few more of these pairings.
Watched
So,
a lot of wrestling the last few days.
It's okay. So did we.
so we had El Matador Tito Santana, who was a great wrestler, Tito Santana, who had to be a ridiculous cartoon gimmick because it was the early 90s in the WWF, so they made him a matador, which is not racist at all. And he and Shawn Michaels eliminate each other. They would eventually wrestle at WrestleMania 8. Flair himself squares off with Greg Valentine, who was kind of WWF's answer to Flair in the 80s for a little
Not
while.
very good answer.
Not a great answer. No, I mean, Valentine's a fine talent
Oh,
on
yeah,
his own.
but he's no Ric Flair.
Piper and Flair is a great meeting because they had feuded in the NWA for years, many years before this.
I forgot to mention. I had a quick note about Roddy Piper. You guys have mentioned in the past that Roddy Piper was like not trained the same way as other wrestlers or something like that.
He wasn't really trained.
Because he definitely has a different like physical style. He moves differently from all the rest of them in a way that looks like, oh, that looks bad for you.
Yeah.
Like that looks like you should not be landing that way.
He eventually needed a hip replacement. Not that much after this, or a few years after this, he
Yeah.
got a hip replacement. Kept wrestling.
He was a boxer by training.
He was a boxer by training.
He
yes.
was he was on that episode of Always Sunny, right?
Yes.
That was
That was
he
him.
fucking great.
He
on
was
that.
great.
Yeah.
Piper is like you can't mess with Piper, and Piper was very charismatic. He knew how to. He popped out of the screen. And the story with him in this Rumble is that at this event he won the Intercontinental title, and he was hyping him up. I'm gonna win both belts tonight. You know, he didn't quite make it, but he was there at the end. He was one of the last guys in the ring.
Subscribe to Patreon so you can hear our upcoming episode where we watch and discuss Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Yeah,
Doc-
we're gonna do that.
Doc Butt Tears still coming soon.
Hey.
So, two more pairings here I wanted to talk about. Savage and Flair, who
Yeah.
would eventually wrestle at WrestleMania 8 in a classic. And an interesting one for me, Rick Martel, who by now was the model, against Ric Flair. Years previous, they had wrestled when the model was the AWA champion and Flair was the NWA champion in a very rare champion versus champion match for the time. I think it was a draw.
Yeah,
As
that's how those usually went.
Hot champion on champion action.
Rick Martel was rated highly and underrated. So that's my take on Rick Martel. Big fan.
So the finish of this match. So first of all, we get the Warlord at number 30. The 30th entrant has classically been a oversized underachiever.
Yeah, classically. Not every time, but often. They almost never win. And yeah, the Warlord fits that bill. He clearly took a lot of steroids and was not very good.
We get a final four of Hulk Hogan, Sid Justice, who I'm surprised you haven't mentioned, Evan, because
There was a guy who I wrote down. Who is this Aryan Superman?
that describes
With
it.
like curly hair.
Yeah,
That's
that's Sid
it. Yeah,
Justice.
that's Sid, and
Yeah.
he's incredible in like the most awful way possible.
And then we have Savage and Flair. Sid throws Savage out. Then Hogan's menacing Flair in the corner, and Sid throws Hogan out. And Hogan, in a total act of being a complete fucking sore loser, reaches his arm out, grabs Sid, and despite having already been eliminated, then pulls Sid out, which breaks the earlier... Flair helped. Flair helped. All right, never mind.
He held Sid's hand, but Flair grabbed Sid's legs and threw him over the top.
I mean, it's still like, man, Hogan was the most heel like super baby face ever.
Yeah, what a dick. He would face Sid Justice at WrestleMania 8
Yes.
in the main event.
I was happy when Ric Flair won. I felt like he deserved it.
He
I
did.
Felt like
He did,
I
yes.
felt behind him.
The fact that Hogan and Flair were squaring off is very significant. The idea, it must have been so fucking cool to be a wrestling fan at this time. This is just before I started watching, when Flair and Hogan, the two biggest wrestling stars of the 80s who you never thought would ever wrestle, are finally in the same promotion together. Fortunately, they never had a really big blow off in the WWF.
Yeah, apparently the house show business, the first loop did fine and the second loop didn't. A lot of the WWF fans that only watched the WWF since the mid 80s, they didn't know who Ric Flair was. And it's, there wasn't the internet. They weren't getting tapes from South. They weren't watching WCW on TBS. They didn't really know who Ric Flair was.
They eventually had the big match in WCW
Right.
after Hogan left for
later.
WCW. Yeah.
Let's move on then to 2016.
So,
the years of
so
time.
first thing I'm going to mention about 2016 is that 6 of these people are now in AEW, and judging by the quality of the 2016 WWE Royal Rumble, you can see why.
Neville, Stardust, Jack Swagger, Dean Ambrose,
Jericho.
Jericho, and who else that they did fucking nothing with?
I'm looking now because I had the list up. It was 6.
Goldust.
And Goldust, yeah.
Yes,
Goldust.
Goldust.
Most people who were an afterthought in this Rumble.
Yeah.
Ambrose should have fucking won the thing in the end. That would have been great.
Yeah, that would have been great.
We all knew either Reigns or Triple H were going to win.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up being Triple H, but when it came down to Ambrose and Triple H, for a second, it was like, maybe they do something cool, and Ambrose wins, and they do Reigns-Ambrose at Mania, but fuck no.
Laura and I were watching this, and we were like, we don't know who this weird little shrimpy fucking Ambrose guy
Yeah.
is, but like, man, I am now rooting for him because I was when I started to realize that it was a possibility that they were going to give it to fucking Triple H, I was like, no, don't give it to the guy that everyone knows is the boss who's been around and shitty for 20 plus years. Like, oh,
That's
my God.
what
I
we
was like,
all
I
thought.
would have rather, as upset as I was earlier in this episode when I spaced and forgot that Roman Reigns didn't win,
Yeah.
I would have honestly probably been less upset because I guess I just it seemed like that's where it was going, and then I understand that they wanted to maybe subvert it in some way, but this was the single worst possible way to subvert it.
I do just want to congratulate you, Evan, on the fact that you made your wife sit through the entire 2016 Royal Rumble with you, and you are still married.
It was I have to say it was a thing where I was like, oh my God, like I gotta watch all this fucking wrestling before Monday, and she was like, well, let's watch some right now, because sometimes she really does enjoy it.
Yeah.
We watched the 92 one together, and she was like, this is fucking amazing, because it was, because
Yeah.
it was really great, and it's, and you're watching Shawn Michaels was destroying barbershops, and he must just constantly do that, and that's why his hair's like that, and
That's
and
interesting.
also it was so there's a lot of fun, and then we're watching this, and we're just like, I could feel her drifting and getting frustrated, and then
Starting to resent you.
yeah, and
So-
I resent myself watching these.
So, as you already alluded to, the fucking League of Nations, Triple H's cronies, come out, put fucking Reigns through a table. They bring a stretcher out for him, but he doesn't go out on the stretcher.
Yeah.
He limps out on his own power.
Yeah.
What fucking babyface would just walk out on their own power? This is an allusion to the Hell in a Cell match with Mick Foley, where he went out on a stretcher and then heroically came back once he came to.
Yeah, 1 minute later.
Yo,
Reigns was fucking awake the whole time, knew this was going on, and didn't come back until like 20 minutes later after all the big threats like Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman had already been eliminated.
Reigns' booking this whole match just makes him look like such a baby back bitch.
That's the thing. It's like if he had been in it the whole time and either won or was in it the whole time but then lost to Triple H, I would have won a lot more respect for him. I would have been like, hey, at least the motherfucker can fucking wrestle for an hour, right?
Ric Flair
Like,
was
at
in the
least
whole match.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and then also, yeah, the fact that they take him away. Like, my assumption was like, oh, like he'll just be out the whole time, and then they'll pull some kind of thing like, oh, well, he like still has whatever title he had previously, and this is just sort of like
He never got beat.
Yeah, exactly. Like
That would have been kind of interesting.
I assumed that's what was going to happen because I couldn't imagine that they were going to do what they did, which is let's just have him come back after like a bunch of other guys got beaten for him.
Runs in blazing, punching people.
The scary thing is we knew exactly that they were going to do that. It was just such a transparent attempt to get sympathy for him in the stupidest, most ham-fisted way possible.
Man, this Rumble is depressing.
So I watched this fucking Big Show Chex Mix focus group ad
Yeah.
that came just because I was like jumping to the match, and then it said Big Show checks mixed focus group, and I'm like, well, I guess I can spare 90 seconds to watch this before the match.
And
I
that's
don't know
when
what
she
it
filed
was.
for divorce.
The one cool thing about 2016, real quick, the Rumble, AJ Styles debuts.
Yes.
AJ Styles debuts.
Yeah.
I love also when they throw him out, the guy yells, "Welcome to WWE." And
Oh,
throws
Kevin
him out.
Owens. He was the
Yeah.
perfect guy to do it, too. It wasn't like one of the established guys trying
Yeah,
to
no,
bury
it was
AJ
this dick.
AJ had wrestled at Wrestle Kingdom, and in a match that we will have covered on a premium episode 2 months before this. Wait,
no,
wait.
no.
2
2
weeks,
weeks
before,
before
this.
this.
Sorry.
Like-
He had wrestled on Wrestle Kingdom 2 weeks before this.
AJ Styles is I'm going to talk about this in the premium episode we're recording later too, but I had this realization about AJ Styles where he is a really interesting guy because he is not interesting. He is somebody who does not have charisma but does have presence.
Yeah.
He is like, it's a testament to how great of a wrestler he is that he is not interesting.
Yeah.
He's like
Yeah.
he's like his character is kind of nothing, but he's really striking to look at. He has beautiful eyes, as I'm on the record as saying that AJ Styles has some of the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen a human being have. He fucking he's just that good of a wrestler where you can watch the matches and it's really entertaining, even though he doesn't really have much of a character or like any like crowd command or anything.
He's
But
the
yeah.
greatest broomstick anyone should ever try to wrestle.
I feel like he is. I'm gonna try to make a wrestling fan observation. Let's see if this works.
Oh, boy.
I feel like he has what the WWE wants Seth Rollins to have.
Yes.
Totally.
Exactly.
Where
Yes.
he is a blank slate that's still just so good at wrestling, you kind of want to watch him do it.
Right. So the other cool thing that I liked in this Royal Rumble, because the AJ Styles debut was phenomenal. Yeah. So Braun Strowman wasn't very good yet. I'm a big fan of Braun Strowman these days. I think he's very good for a big man and all. But he was still finding his feet. All that they had really given him is that he was the biggest dude with the Wyatt family there, and nobody could bump him, and he was just big and menacing. So he comes into the ring, and then Brock Lesnar comes into the ring. Brock throws him back and forth a couple times. And Brock had been mowing down everyone in the ring. And then Brock runs up to him and clotheslines him, and then clotheslines him again, and he doesn't go down. And then Brock takes half a step back and really clotheslines him, and Brock goes down really hard. Like, Brock just hits him in the face with his arm, and Strowman just drops.
I thought that whole thing with Brock and the Wyatts was great, where he eliminates them all before Bray gets
Right.
there.
No, that was great. Yeah,
And then they all come in and throw him out anyway,
Yeah.
which would have been great if that was the fucking WrestleMania match they were going to do.
Yeah,
Because I will say the part of this match that was interesting was the whole the Wyatts taking over
Yeah.
and you being like, oh my god, like what's gonna happen, and then Lesnar comes in and eliminates all of them. It did start to feel a little bit like when they came back into the ring and started beating on him. I was just like, okay, well, like if they can just fucking do that.
What was the point of including them all in the Rumble to begin with?
Yeah, and I'm like, if the refs are like this toothless, then like why have fucking rules? You know what I mean? Like I don't know, like that. It built up in this cool way, and then like broke, and then that was shitty, and then Reigns came back, and it was like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
I know that this is a very large question.
Yeah.
But like, so Goldust, like, what's
We got to do
Okay.
like an
Yeah,
episode
that's
or
a
two
whole
on
episode
Dustin
in and of
Rhodes.
itself.
Very interesting character, a very interesting case, and a very interesting performer. Yeah,
At
that's
least
a lot.
one
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
respect wrestling in a full body suit?
He's
That looks
supposed to
hard.
make you a tad uncomfortable.
And the original idea for the look is he's supposed to be like an Oscar statue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. It
All
made
right.
more sense. His original gimmick, he had like quote old movies and stuff, but that was in the mid '90s. That was a long time before.
All right,
him.
let's
Is
get to-
Star- Well,
okay.
oh, no, I do have a couple more things here. What is Stardust?
Is his brother.
Okay,
Cody.
that's right.
Cody, that's
Yeah, that's Cody Rhodes.
Ryback at one point is in the ring doing his thing, and the announcer says it's feeding time for the big guy,
He would say, "Feed me more," like a infant.
giant baby. Because
Exactly.
I was like, this is either infantilizing or
Totally.
or
It's-
disturbingly sexual.
It's
He's also a big fan of The Secret. Right,
yum
that
yum
doesn't
time for
surprise
Big
me.
Baby.
He's too he's too ripped. There is a point at which
Yeah.
you have too much muscle. I feel like for
He
it
has
to
a
be,
lot of
like,
muscle.
I don't care for it. Who's the third guy in the League of Ethnic Caricatures?
There's Rusev, Alberto Del Rio,
who's-
and Sheamus.
Where is Alberto Del Rio from?
Del Rio is from Mexico.
Okay.
He is the son of Dos Caras, one of the great luchadors of all time, and in his own right is a fantastic wrestler. WWE never really quite used him right.
Yeah. They pushed him to the top a little bit,
Oh,
but they
immediately.
didn't get him.
Big deal,
It
fairly
is-
quick.
Yeah.
It is weird to have a League of Ethnic Caricatures in 2016, right? Because that is what the
Yeah.
League of Nations
Oh, yeah.
is. It's
There,
like-
there was a fourth guy with them, Wade Barrett, who was British, but I think he was on the shelf at the time. He has since retired and does commentary.
For NWA Power.
Um,
Yes, that's true.
But yeah, and then there was a lot of the synchronized punching in this match. That's just like a lot of times that's how it opens, where like it starts off and they're punching each other, and they're both like their fists are each touching their heads at the same time.
That's one
And
of the
it's like-
great Rumble spots is when two rivals suddenly meet each other in the ring and they're both just punching. That started with Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, I think, in the '93 Rumble.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's really
Yeah, I don't
all I
want
had
to dwell
say.
on this one much. Let's get to the Women's Rumble.
I want to hear Evan's.
2018.
I want to hear Evan's notes about all these women who he has no idea who they are.
So first of all, we got to mention fucking Stephanie putting her stamp on this at the fucking
Yeah.
beginning.
Oh, yeah.
She's the one who announced that it was going to happen, and she gets to be on commentary. Though she actually had a couple of good
She was
moments
fine
on
on
commentary.
honestly, I'm glad she was on commentary because the alternative was just her being in the match.
She pointed out that Kairi Sane has the greatest top rope elbow drop of all time. I don't know if you noticed the pirate Japanese.
Oh, I did notice. I
wrestler.
did. Who is the Japanese future pirate?
That's Kairi Sane. This was her debut on the main roster, and I love her. She's
She's
amazing.
great.
Yeah, she's fucking
She's
awesome.
currently one half of the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions with Asuka.
Steph is also right to caution these people going to the top rope all the time.
Yeah.
That's the best way to get thrown out, you know? But hey.
Oh, the other alternative I'd like to point out of Stephanie doing commentary is that they could have got Jerry Lawler, and that would have been bad. He was elsewhere on the show, I believe. Yeah. So what did you think of the Women's Rumble, Evan? Because
Well-
it's a favorite of mine.
Well, I'll be honest. This is a pattern I'm starting to notice. If I really like a match, I have fewer notes.
Yeah,
so,
you're
that's the
actually
thing.
watching it.
Yeah,
So
like
that's
so.
good.
I don't have a lot.
Yeah.
You
You don't have to make cheap jokes about it. I love cheap jokes,
is
but you don't
there-
have to make cheap jokes
Is
about
there anything about in your notes about random shrieking middle-aged woman?
Oh, I know. I now know enough. I know who that is now. I know. She.
Excuse her.
Oh man.
Oh, the best.
it. We were so happy when she came out.
Me and Doc were actually at this Rumble.
We
It's
were.
worth noting. We were there live. It was in Philadelphia where we were living at the
We're,
time.
we're talking about Vicky Guerrero, by the way.
Yeah,
The best.
There is a little
best.
like there's the little joke. Actually, this is the same thing. The last thing I have to say about 2016 is I did like the joke of the guy who runs in, sets up a ladder, clearly thinking it's that kind of match where they're dangling
true.
the,
Oh,
the
that's
belt
our-
from the top.
That's our truth, and he is incredible.
He's a
And,
genius.
Yeah, he's an amazing performer. His gimmick at the time, and still kind of now, is that he doesn't know what's going on.
I thought that was fucking when he went up.
Well,
He's
one
like,
of-
"Where is
My
this?"
bad.
Yeah.
One of the things he does these days is that he talks about how his childhood hero was John Cena. He's about 8 years older than John Cena.
Yeah, is our truth 50
I
yet?
think he's 49.
I will Google this. as
He's
I go.
ageless. He's great.
I think it's a crime that he's never been WWE champion.
I also think this is
The
a crime.
one time they actually took him seriously and he was kind of a dangerous heel, he had one main event against John Cena, and then they immediately made him a joke character again.
He's 47.
I mean, that was just even if he's. I couldn't tell how good of a wrestler he was in this, but
Oh,
even
he's
if
incredible.
he was a joke character, like his fucking comic timing is like in the fucking top echelon of any wrestler I've ever seen. Like
What-
that, he absolutely should be in it more, at least if for no other reason than that.
Well, to specifically what the because we haven't shown him any Money in the Bank matches, have you? You haven't.
I don't think we've seen any of those yet,
Specifically,
no.
what he's confused about is he comes in thinking it's the Money in the Bank ladder match, which is a very other specific like gimmick match that WWE does with a lot of people. Except the idea is you go up a ladder to grab a briefcase, so that's why he
okay.
had the square hands like.
Yeah, he's up there
I
and he's
see.
like, "Where's the briefcase?" Or title if it were a traditional
I
ladder
think it was
match.
supposed to be Money in the Bank.
I think you're right.
Yeah, because he did put his hands like briefcase.
And the briefcase has a automatic world title shot at your choosing at any point. Like literally, you can just hit someone with the briefcase and pin them basically.
So here are the extent of the notes I took for 2018.
Yeah.
One that, like I said earlier, the whole "who the fuck is this" factor was a lot less of a problem for me in this match. Just also everybody seemed like an interesting character in and of themselves. I like the Japanese future pirates. I was wondering if they shot it on. Was this on Halloween?
That was
No,
in January.
January.
No,
Because in the front row, there's one guy dressed like Where's Waldo, and
I
there's a
noticed
guy
that.
with him who's dressed like a taco.
I remember Waldo.
I don't know why people will just show up to these things like I'll be on television. Let me be wacky.
Makes sense. They clearly came together,
Yeah.
Or just happened to wind up sitting next to each other through huge
How
coincidence.
coincidental?
Did
yeah.
you notice Lita, who came back for this match and was all right? That moonsault was kind of
That
dangerous.
was terrifying.
But she's wearing a hashtag Time's Up on her gear.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because she is somebody who was like
Yeah.
fucking cannibalized by the wrestling community at the time, right?
Several
And,
years
like,
previously, yeah. She was a big success and always very over, but she got out for several years. She makes more appearances nowadays, but she got out for several years.
I wrote, whoa, Stu Hart's granddaughter has +3 armor.
Oh yeah,
Because she comes out wearing like full on, like, I don't know, like battle armor.
yeah, well, I mean,
Natalia.
I mean,
she's
Natty
great.
is the vet of the women's division
Yeah.
in the WWE. The people have complaints about her because at this point, like, she's been doing this exact same thing for a decade on TV. I love her though. Like, I adore Natty.
when they want to have somebody who doesn't quite know what they're doing yet have a good match, they'll give her to Natty. They had Natty help Ronda Rousey a lot when she first started, and one of the big deals of this Rumble, and like probably the reason why it went on last on the show, was the big surprise at the end after everybody. After Asuka wins and the champions come in the ring, like, you'll face one of us at WrestleMania.
champions being Charlotte and Alexa Bliss at the
Yes,
time.
yes. And, Bad Reputation by Joan Jett comes on, and Ronda Rousey comes out. This is her first appearance. It was a big, it wasn't, people were waiting
It was
for
her
her to
second
come.
appearance.
What was her
technic-
first appearance?
On WrestleMania years
right,
prior when
31.
she slugged
Yeah,
Steph.
yeah.
I was there for that. That was amazing.
Well, this was her first appearance since she had signed her contract, and people had known that, but they didn't know when she was showing up. People thought maybe she'd be a surprise entrant in the Rumble, and like when people are gearing up for a big surprise, it's hard to be number 30 and not be the surprise. And I thought that the best person other than Ronda Rousey to be number 30 was Trish Stratus,
Which
who
is what
had.
they did, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I
He
just
doesn't-
wanna-
oh, go ahead.
I want to
No.
point out about Ronda Rousey real quick that she points at the WrestleMania sign as you do
Yes.
when after the Royal Rumble because
lot.
it's like I'm going to WrestleMania. Asuka did it first, and then Ronda did. Betsy.
Dang, I lost my train of thought
sorry.
completely. It's okay.
Were you about to ask me if I knew who Trish Stratus was?
Do you know who Trish Stratus
Yes.
is? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. Now, she was a very big star. Like, she's the epitome of somebody who they hired out of fitness catalogs and showed up and was like, okay, I'm a pro wrestler now. Let me learn how to be a pro wrestler.
Another person that's in that match that did that exact same thing was Naomi.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
they
yeah.
hired her. She was like a cheerleader, right? She was a dancer.
Yeah. She was a professional cheerleader.
profession. She's like, nope, I'm going to be good at wrestling now.
Now she
Is that the woman in neon green
Yeah.
who does the
Yes.
butt attacks?
Yes.
Because she came out and did like 4 butt attacks in a row,
Yeah.
and they were convincing. I was
Yeah.
like, that
I mean,
looks like
she-
she hurt them with her butt.
That's
She
her
has
finish.
the butt
Yeah.
for that, is
Yeah.
the thing.
She
like,
calls it the rear view. Yeah.
Then Tori Wilson came out, and we were all happy to see her. And then it became clear she hadn't retained a single thing about anything she
Tori,
learned about wrestling.
More so than Kelly Though.
No, I thought Kelly did better.
I thought Kelly
Oh
just
man,
said
that
it,
head
yeah.
scissors was.
That was a bit
mess.
rough. But Tori couldn't even get her legs up to the rope.
That's
you
that's
know?
the thing. That's what they refused to put me in the ring for.
I was really excited to see Molly Holly, and she killed it.
She's the opposite. She remembered everything, you know.
Well, she trains people now.
Yeah.
Molly Holly was a great wrestler. In the age where women were mostly just seen as underwear models, she refused to do anything like overtly sexual. And she, they kept her around for years with it because she was just so good. And she was a good foil, and like she had a great match at WrestleMania 20 with Victoria, title versus hair, where she got her head shaved, which is great in wrestling. And yeah, a lot of respect for Molly Holly.
As I said before, I had never seen Nia Jax wrestle, and like that, she's pretty fucking impressive.
She said in an interview that she asked Vince McMahon straight up, like, what do you want from me? As people are scared to do. And Vince looked at her and said, I want you to be the female Andre the Giant. And Nia's like, that's what you want? That's how I'm going to act in the ring. and it's very effective.
Oh yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
it's like she's a fucking tank when she gets up there. Like
She was a plus-size model.
The Rock's cousin.
She is the Rock's. She's in the family.
She's one of the Samoans. Yes.
Yeah, so is Naomi. Naomi married into the family.
And
She's
Tamina-
one of the Usos.
Tamina also is there as the daughter of Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Also,
Yeah.
part
He
of
totally
the-
killed that girl.
He did totally kill that girl, but that's not Tamina's fault.
No one blames her. I just feel the need to mention anytime someone mentions Snuka, he killed that girl.
Totally
It was
killed that
cool
girl.
seeing Trish and Mickey square off after all
Oh,
those
yeah.
years. They had a great WrestleMania match at 22, I believe.
so,
Trish holds up the 7 and does it just close enough to her face
Yeah.
that it kind of looks like she's doing the thing Mickey did that they tried to scrub off. The
She also,
existence.
at some point, licks her hand before delivering a chop, which I
Right.
thought might have been a subtle homage to that. Should we tell Evan what we're talking
Yeah, if you
about?
want.
I will. That is the point of this
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
So they did a match at WrestleMania between Trish and Mickey, where Mickey was kind of stalking Trish.
Oh, she was in love with Trish.
Well,
She
yeah.
had like professed her
What
love
year-
and everything. Yeah.
What year was this?
2006, 2000, or something like that.
2006, I think.
I'll
And at one point in the match, what's the exact spot?
Well, the exact spot is Mickey gives Trish the vaginal claw.
Right, the vaginal
just
claw,
grabs her-
like
grabs
the
her
mandible
by the
claw,
junk there,
but you know,
And
yeah.
then turns to hard cam and puts her hand up and licks it bottom to top. And they have cut that out of all the replays and
It's
DVDs.
2006. Yeah, that
But,
was when the match happened.
But I watched it while it was happening, and that
Same, yeah.
happened. They also
It
they
did
also
happen.
cut out half of the finish because they go for Trish's finishing move, which is where she puts you in a headlock and bounces off the top rope and does a
Which
bulldog.
normally looks incredible.
She
and-
tried to do it in this Rumble, but Sasha reversed it and threw her out.
But she goes for it and misses the top rope with her feet, and they fall over. And they just get up and do it again, and they cut the first one out. But again, I was watching. That happened.
I'm sure you can find
Yep.
that on YouTube if you.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you can.
I do want to give props to fucking 53-year-old Jacqueline coming out
yeah.
and just beating everyone's ass.
One thing I wanted to point out, they reference Jacqueline being a former cruiserweight champion.
Yeah.
They reference Beth Phoenix eliminating Great Khali from the Royal Rumble. I mean, they did. They had Nia come out the next year in the men's Rumble,
And-
right?
And force herself into it, yeah.
But they do very little intergender stuff now, and it's
Yeah.
weird to me that they kind of reference it, like, yeah, you know, we used to be cooler and more progressive.
Well, it's a function of attitudes of the time. At the time, it was more like this is the crazy cutting edge, politically incorrect late 90s, early 2000s, screw you if you think we're causing a problem. But now intergender wrestling is actually a really big thing in wrestling, and it's controversial as to, we've talked about it a little bit as to whether it reflects domestic violence, which it doesn't. And if you want to debate me on that, I don't want to debate you on it.
We'll
I'm
do
right,
an
it doesn't.
episode.
Yeah,
where
we'll do
we
an
talk
episode.
about it more.
We can say that
You
if-
can debate me on it if you want.
Well, no, I'll say that if that was my first thought,
Right,
well,
right.
and that is a reasonable first thought
Exactly.
to have. And what changed my mind on it was reading what female wrestlers had to say on the topic, and female wrestlers almost universally seem to be in agreement. Like, well, since this is something I want to do. And if you think that it's like bad that I'm doing it, then you don't understand the nature of consent
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, but I don't think it's unreasonable to have that concern initially.
Yeah.
You just gotta do your
Betsy,
homework.
you got a word on that?
No. I just wanted to mention my favorite part of this Rumble. We
Oh,
glossed over it a little. Is just when nobody saw this coming. We were all been debating, what wrestlers are gonna get in this Rumble, and then Vicky Guerrero comes out, and you hear that split second where the crowd is just so happy to see her that they start to cheer you a cheer that immediately everyone remembers their place and remembers that Vicky Guerrero is evil, and the chorus of boos just takes over.
She could be in a grindcore band too, man. Like,
Yeah.
she can
Yeah.
really fucking make an awful sound. Like,
She's the best.
Oh well, she wasn't. She happened by accident,
Yeah, they gave her a job like after Eddie Guerrero had died because
take
she's the
care of
widow
her,
to
you
take
know?
care of her, and she just took to it. And then they came upon this character for her. It's like she's like every like awful grade school
She
teacher.
wants
you've
to
ever
talk
had.
to your manager
Right,
Yeah.
she
right
wants to talk to
now.
you. She did commentary a couple of weeks ago on an episode of AEW Dark, where they bringing out like guests to do commentary, and the whole time she was just making like creeper comments about the guys, like, like it's
My
cougar
spirit
season.
animal.
She's
Come
the-
here, yeah,
That what an amazing character, the sexually inappropriate principal.
right, exactly. Oh man. So as the Rumble progressed, both Bella twins come out. They were both like recently stopped wrestling, but they were still very much over and in shape and
Brie
could
had
do
just
it.
had a baby.
Brie had just had a baby a month or
couple
two
months
before
prior,
that.
yeah.
Nikki ends up turning on Brie and eliminating her.
Right. The long and the Bella twins had eventually won my respect. I did not like
We-
them when they first came out.
We should mention Michelle McCool, who I think gets
Yep.
the most eliminations.
No,
in
I
this
mean it
match.
made sense for her to look like a beast because, like, I mean, she hadn't lost a step in that Rumble.
No,
like,
she was in great
a lot
shape.
of people gave Michelle McCool a lot of shit, but she got really good by like the end of her career.
Evan, what did you think of the winner of the Rumble, Asuka,
Oh,
who
she's
is one of
great.
my favorite wrestlers of
Yeah,
all
me too.
time?
So fucking great. Yeah.
I love
I'm trying to remember. I didn't really have any like specific comments about it. I just really liked her energy. I really liked her physicality. I couldn't quite figure out what her character was, but it didn't feel like that mattered.
No.
Really,
Yeah.
like
She is possibly the best active female wrestler in the world.
She's possibly the best active wrestler in the world. I love her.
yeah, like she just like all of I feel like she's like good she's good enough where she's really impressive to watch and like convincingly beats people, but she's also not, she doesn't seem like overpowered, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no,
it's like
no.
it really does seem like a like she's evenly matched with pretty much everybody. So then I really didn't know if she was gonna win or not.
She had a super lengthy reign as NXT Women's Champion. She had to relinquish the title due to injury, and then they immediately just moved her to the main roster. So she never lost for that title. So they were touting her unbeaten streak, which didn't end until WrestleMania. We should do an episode about her and watch some of those classic NXT matches. Her big catchphrase, she doesn't know a lot of English. She learned a little, but her big catchphrase that she would say in English is, "No one is ready for Asuka." And she proved it
great.
over and over again.
And
Over and over, she's still proving it.
When Ember Moon came to the ring, who was the NXT Women's Champion at that time, she had a great match with Shayna Baszler the night before. This is before Shayna's great run.
She was the African American girl who came out in the sling.
yeah,
Okay,
and,
her arm
okay.
tied up.
and
All
she,
right, yeah,
and
yeah.
she came to the ring. They had sold her arm like really hard the night before. It was very well done. And she had a great rivalry with Asuka, except Asuka just beat her over and over again in NXT. And she comes face to face. The first thing Asuka does is make her own arm go limp and point at it and then start laughing at Ember Moon like, "Ha ha ha, you're injured. I'm going to beat you up." And then she does.
It's weird because Asuka would be a kind of stereotype with the whole like kabuki samurai thing,
Yeah.
but it's done in such a bizarre, flamboyant, colorful way that it doesn't come off like
Well,
that.
also,
Okay,
it
so-
seems like that is. I would get the vibe at least that is her idea. That
Yeah,
is
that's
her,
actually.
yeah.
But there's a lot of her in that gimmick, you know.
Yeah, I think you'll appreciate this. A lot of wrestlers, like when they do their theme music, they don't use licensed theme music for the most part, but you can go up to the music guy when they're developing it and give them a song or two you want and be like, make something like this, even if it's not you ever hear like obvious rip-off songs that change a couple notes?
Like how like the Wyatt's fucking theme song being the Great Lost Alice in Chains track.
Yeah, I
like
always
that kind
thought that,
It's 100% what happens.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Well, Asuka's theme song, which you just heard a little bit as they were coming out,
Yeah, I can't remember it.
it's definitely a style lift of 21st Century Schizoid Man by
Really?
King Crimson.
Yeah.
All
We can
right.
listen to it like properly at one point. You'll hear it.
I
You
have
hear
to
the
go-
vocals come in. Like, it's very Crimson-y.
I'm amazed that I didn't
Yeah.
catch that Crimson is to this date my favorite band ever.
yeah.
So I should. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
totally
they-
gonna go check that out.
They're incredible. Kiddies, if you've never heard of King Crimson, give that a Google.
It is. It's all on Spotify now.
It's all on
actually.
Spotify now,
It
good.
finally got on there.
We would be remiss to not mention Sasha Banks' incredible performance in this
yeah.
match,
Yes.
being the Iron Woman of the match, lasting for almost the entire thing. She starts off with Becky Lynch at the beginning, and she is the she's in the final four, being eliminated by the Bellas
Yeah.
before Nikki eliminates Brie, and then Asuka chucks Nikki.
Paige was not in this, right?
No.
She had to retire weeks earlier from her neck
Oh no.
injury problems.
I just so this is very tangentially related. So I didn't. You had mentioned that they made a movie about Paige fighting with my family.
Yeah.
When you talked about that, I thought that it was a documentary.
No,
and I did
no.
not realize that it was like a full on because I just my birthday was a couple days ago. and I was like, for my birthday, let's watch a fucked up movie. So I watched Midsummer, which I had not seen, and the main actress in Midsummer played Paige in that movie, and I had never seen her. She fucking crushed it in Midsummer. It's a great movie. So
Fighting with Your Family, I didn't see it, but it got really good reviews.
Yeah,
And
we should totally see it.
And the girl is like, in the trailers, from what I've seen, I haven't seen it as well, is Paige.
Yeah.
Like, to a scary extent.
I think Zelina Vega plays AJ Styles.
She does.
AJ Styles, AJ Lee. Zelina Vega
Man,
plays
fucking
AJ
range.
Lee.
She don't want
Yeah.
none.
She don't want none.
That would be something.
It really would. Oh man.
This was kind of rapid fire, but that's sort of good for the Royal Rumble.
For the premium episode, we're gonna have to just have a bell that we hit every 2 minutes. Move on to the next point.
Well,
next point.
On the premium episode, we're not going to spend 15 minutes explaining what the Royal Rumble is.
True.
We're just going to get right into
The
it.
premium
And-
episode rumbles are ridiculous.
So if you would like to hear the premium episode that we're going to record shortly about it and all of our other premium episodes, please join our Patreon if you're into that kind of thing. For $5 a month, you get a whole other episode every week. We work very hard on it. Works hard on those we do on these. We like it. People seem to like it. So give it a shot. And we're going to review 3 more Royal Rumbles over on Patreon.
Doc butt tier incoming.
Patreon.com/contesting wrestling.
That's right.
Yeah, we've got this is gonna be coming out sometime in February or possibly.
Well, hopefully before the Royal
Oh,
Rumble.
we're
in
right,
January.
we're right. Yeah, we're doing this out of order. All right, so this is gonna be coming out in January. This is the first episode we are recording in the new year, and I don't know. We're pumped for this year. We're gonna have a lot of cool stuff coming at you.
Happy New Year.
Joke.
At Contesting W on Twitter, at Contesting Wrestling Podcast on Instagram. Follow us.
Yeah,
and such.
follow me at Dr. Diamond Fire, Dr. Diamond Fire on Twitter.
At good old BR.
At Scribe Ben, Instagram and Twitter.
At Evan Burke, etc. on Instagram and Twitter, and Facebook as well. All right, we love you. We'll
We
see
do.
you soon.
Butts.
Keep rumbling royally.
Like Vladimir Kozlov, love double
Yeah.
double E.
Love double E.
Yeah.